Welcome to the Trailbreaker Podcast. I'm Aaron Feiberg. In this podcast, I explore what it takes to be a trailbreaker. Through intimate conversations with people carving new paths across the landscapes of business, art, and sport, we dig in on how to excel across seemingly disparate endeavors. What drives people who manage to succeed multidimensionally? Is it how they think? Is it meticulous planning and follow-through? Or is it some measure of delusional optimism? My guest today is Kelly Halpin, a professional mountain runner, professional illustrator, and self-proclaimed nature nerd. We talked about creative ways to get kids outside, the juxtaposition of flow and perfectionism, and why it's important to be able to suffer well. Good afternoon, Kelly, and thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And officially, today is Valentine's Day, the day for love, and you are a woman with a lot of loves. Mountain running, snowboarding, illustration, kids' books, foraging. What else did I miss?
I don't know. I guess that covers it. I'm just a super nerd.
What do you say no to? I know that list is pretty broad, but is there anything that's like on the absolutely no for Kelly or never again for Kelly?
Usually it would be watching some kind of a sports game, although I appreciate soccer and I did watch the World Cup, and I actually sort of watched the Super Bowl.
The sports ball game?
The sports ball game, meaning I watched it as in I was in a house with a bunch of friends and we watched the halftime show. And but I feel like I kind of crossed a line where I was like, okay, like I'm trying something new. I'm going to sort of pretend like I'm watching a football game, which I don't care much for, but the camaraderie around it was really fun and I enjoyed myself.
You are a trailbreaker, so maybe this is a new path for you.
Maybe.
Well, look, it's really great to connect. And, myself and my daughter have been on the receiving end of a few of your amazing books. And at the risk of it coming off like Oprah Book Club, we have them here. And we've got the first one here, Silas in the Last Forest. And we also have the most recent edition, and Wildlife in the Tetons. And so just real quick, like the Silas book came out in, I think 2019 is when we grabbed it from you. And the most recent one is from 2022. In terms of how you've changed as a creator, in terms of the intentions or the reasoning for Silas in the Forest versus kind of how you've shown up for this most recent edition, what would you say is maybe shifted in you, and whether it's your artistic style or maybe even your intentions for putting the book out?
Oh man, I mean, in some ways the books are in two different categories, whereas one is a narrative story, like a make-believe, a future where humans just don't go outside anymore, which we're getting closer and closer to that reality. And the second one is just a pretty basic wildlife guidebook for kids in the area. I would say that I've gotten a lot more efficient at creating artwork for children's books in that time span. I've certainly come up with a bunch of new ideas for stories, but in the meantime, I figured I could do some wildlife guidebooks because it's in some ways slightly less creative because I'm basically just making a list of the local animals, but it's still really fun and I love the process for both of them. And I'm excited to create both more guidebooks and more storybooks in the future.
And obviously writing a book there's the writing component, not just the illustration side of it. And have you always been a writer?
I used to write a lot when I was little. I used to write stories. I was trying to write books when I was really young. And in high school and college, I got really into writing short stories. So that was a favorite thing for me to do, even in my free time, which seems crazy now because I probably wouldn't do that now unless I'm writing a story for a children's book. But yeah, I don't know. I love storytelling, both visually and through words. And I don't know, writing children's books is really fun. And yeah, I think I have always loved like all forms of telling stories.
And having never written and am the worst drawer on the planet, when you approach that book, did the writing part of it come easier or harder than the illustration, do you think, for you?
Well, I had the basic story in mind. I think overall writing it was tricky because I'm trying to get across a theme for young children, and that can be tricky because you have to make it really simple and as profound as you can make it in a simple way, and you have to keep it under 500 words if you want anyone to read it, including parents to their kids. So I'd say it was tricky editing it down afterwards, because I kind of like, threw out the story as, just start to finish, and then I started like honing it in, and then I had multiple friends who were editors come through and be like, okay, actually, like this is better, or this is better here. And in hindsight, I probably would have changed a couple of things. I probably would have made the story a little bit longer, but I figured it was really my first real book that I was fully publishing and writing and illustrating. So I was kind of like, just get it out there, just get the book out there, and you can like come up with better stories later. And so in some ways, like, I'm like, I should have gone back and like tweaked it here and here, but the other side, I'm like happy I just got it out there, and it's really helped me like hone in the process of getting a book out there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I bring it up because, as a dad who has read a lot to now my 6-year-old, there are definitely books that the kids just don't connect with, and not because the story's not great or the illustrations aren't cool. It's because of the way that the book is written, right? So the length of the sentences, or the flow and the pace, right? On one hand, you got Dr. Seuss that's just super rhythmic and fun and interesting and quirky, and then you've got stuff that's just all the right words, but it just goes on, and the kids just tune out. And I actually think you did as definitely not a book editor or critiquer, watching how my daughter resonated with it, you hit it. I mean, I don't know that I'm sure everything can be made better, but in terms of just a book that she wanted to read more than once, you nailed it in that way. And I actually think that the story has, she loves to be outside by just her personality and style, and it's part of our life. But I do think she's brought it up a few times. She's, oh, Daddy, can I watch a show? And I said, no, I'm not going to watch a show. And she'll push back a little bit, and I'm like, oh, you remember Silas? Like, what happened with Silas? And it's this great sort of teachable moment, which I'm sure was probably one of the goals, obviously, is to get kids outside. And I know that's a place you like to spend a lot of time.
Oh, I'm so happy that she likes it. That means the world to me. Yeah, I mean, I'm a perfectionist, so I always want to go back and fix things. But I'm glad it's out there, and I'm glad your daughter likes the book, and that makes me really happy.
Totally. And I'll say for this one too, the pictures and the discussion around the different animals, and she hasn't been back to Jackson in the summer for a few years, right? And just the difference between, say, a 2 and a 3-year-old versus now a 6-year-old. I'm excited to sort of bring this book back when next time we visit, and kind of wander her around the valley a little bit, and we can use the book as our field guide.
Oh, yay. Awesome.
So in terms of, the way that your art and, creative pursuits are out there in the world, right? You have this stuff for kids in the book form. Are there other things that you get your hands into? I know that, you do art in a lot of other ways, but specifically for kids, is there any other thing that you're sort of tapping into?
For children specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Not besides doing fun little cartoons for kids I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I like to draw things for kids. And I also like the children's book aspect. And I do illustrate children's books for authors too. So I think I've illustrated 10 books now in total. So I mean, I do feel like that kind of, goes to the kids as well.
Nice. And in around the community of Jackson, I feel like I've seen, pictures of murals and things that you've put up around town. Is that right?
Yeah, I've done a mural. There's an electrical box in East Jackson that has my artwork on it. I didn't have too much to do with that, other than I got selected to have my art on a electrical box, and it's still there. So
oh, nice.
I drove by it earlier.
That wasn't just you in the middle of the night going and tagging something in Jackson.
No, but when I lived in Los Angeles, I used to do that.
Nice, nice. So I know again, as a woman who has a variety of different passions and interests, and amazingly, pretty accomplished across a lot of these, right? So, you're a professional mountain runner. You're pretty serious, if not professional climber too, correct?
I wouldn't call me a professional climber, but I've
Okay.
been climbing most of my life.
Perfect. Well, thank you for correcting me. I realize there's a distinction, right? So I wasn't sure where in the hierarchy you were, and then pretty avid snowboarder as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty avid snowboarder.
And then I obviously see things that the internet shows me around you, foraging and hunting and all sorts of things. And what are your favorite things to go and gather?
Mushrooms.
Why?
I don't know. I just think fungus is really interesting, and it's really rewarding because you can go out and find different species throughout the summer season. Our season in Jackson is really short. It's not like the Pacific Northwest where you have a much longer mushroom season. Ours is like pretty much from end of May until maybe October if you're lucky. So it's kind of precious time, but it's really cool to see like the different varieties pop up throughout the different months of the summer. And I don't know, it's like cool to go out and like harvest morels and chanterelles and porcinis and then make dishes for your friends when you come home. And I don't know, there's just something like very primal and rewarding about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm always fascinated by sort of the approach or the ways that people are being able to be successful or peak performers across these different aspects of life. So, the what would you say if you could come up with like the description for how your mindset is when you're out there foraging versus when you're putting in a fastest known time on a mountain run versus when you're over your pen and paper making a kid's book? Like what's the foraging mindset for you?
Well, in a way, it's all exploration.
Hmm.
Uh, for going out and foraging mushrooms, berries, or hunting. I hunt archery, so I'm out like slowly creeping around with a bow. It's just very peaceful. You're in a flow state. You're just fully present and listening and watching, and it's really similar to running for me, where I'm also in a flow state. I'm just moving a lot faster, and I'm looking at the landscape in a slightly more fast forwarded time. But other than that, it's really similar to me. Like it's just about being outside, finding a flow state, enjoying yourself, enjoying whatever landscape you're in. And with art, it's also exploration. I might have an idea of what I'm going to draw, but in the end, it usually is different than what I had originally had in mind. And it's like a form of adventure.
And when you say flow state, would you also say is meditative?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely meditative. Yeah. Just different forms of meditation, creatively on paper. That's one aspect, but then when you're out running, it's completely different. And you're also constantly watching for animals as well. And then if you're just out wandering around foraging, it's the same thing, just much, much slower. And I love every single aspect of all of those different ventures.
Awesome. And with the juxtaposition against that sort of meditative flow versus the perfectionist, and again, as someone who's not an artist, I can imagine some of the detailed things you do, or you want to get them right, you want to get them perfect. How does that buck up against the pursuit of flow and meditative mindset?
I think it's a challenge. I mean, after I finish a run or a piece of art, I'm like, I could have done that better. I could have done that better. But when you're in the present moment, it's so beautiful no matter what the outcome is, that it kind of doesn't really matter.
Nice. Hence I guess that's why mountain runners or ultra runners, or everybody's constantly redoing their runs or trying to get the fastest known time. I would imagine that's a fire that burns no matter what.
It is. Yes. I go back and try to, even if I have the like the fastest time on a certain segment on like Strava or an FKT, on a route, I if I know I can take my time down, I want to go back and do it again. Because I'm like, I know I can do it. Like, I can do it better. I know where I screwed up. I know how and it just drives me crazy. I'm like, oh, come on.
And is that part of how you've always been, or just since you've started doing these mountain running pursuits, or did you find yourself kind of wired that like that even as a youngster?
Yeah, I think in some ways as a youngster, I was like that, mostly with artwork. I would get really mad if I tried to do a painting and I screwed it up, and I'd be like, it's ruined. I have to start again. I hate it. And my mom would be like, it's okay. Like, it's a painting. You can just keep painting on it and like fix it. And I'd be like, no, it's ruined. I got to start again. I haven't thought about that for a long time or made that comparison before. So that's kind of fun. And then I think with climbing, because I started climbing at age 6. I do remember, especially in college, when I started competing in climbing, I really wanted to get these like bouldering problems like perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about getting to the top of the problem for me, like, and tapping the top. It was about doing it in the most efficient, beautiful way possible, like moving my body like a dancer on the wall. Like, it had to look and feel effortless,
Mm-hmm.
not a struggle. So I suppose I've had that mindset for a long time.
And then growing up, did you do mostly individual sports, or were you ever on team activities, whether sports or arts or what have you?
I always did art. As far excuse me, as far as sports go, I played soccer for a couple of years, and that was fun. My dad's a soccer fanatic, so that was really cool. My sister plays soccer. I played tennis for a little bit. I played basketball, but mostly I was climbing as soon as from age 6 onward, and I competed in equestrian events.
How
So
do you feel about and I don't think there's a right answer to this, but in terms of the individual versus that team things, I think some people are very team focused, and some people can kind of go back and forth, and others are just like, I like to do the solo thing. Do you feel like you land cleanly one place or the other?
I prefer to do the solo thing.
Why?
Uh, I I don't have a I don't have a lot of patience, and I feel like I can rely on myself to start and finish things and set goals and try to set out to accomplish those goals. So I'm very picky when I do have partners in the mountains for certain adventures. Otherwise, I'm just pretty happy doing things on my own.
Yeah, that actually leads me to my next question, which is picking partners for these kind of things. Taking aside, obviously, like ridiculous fitness and expertise and medical training and all sorts of stuff. But what personality traits do you look for when you want to go spend, say, 30, 40 hours running around the mountains with someone?
They have to be optimistic. They have to um, they have to be able to suffer and suffer well with a good attitude. So that's where the optimism plays in, because you can have all kinds of highs and lows out on those really long endurance adventures. But if you're not having a good time, then why, why are you even out there in the first place? I also need someone who has the same risk margin as I do. So we generally have to be comfortable soloing the same kind of grade of like low 5th class rock. Have to have the same attitude about wildlife and what we're comfortable doing. So those end up being pretty important things. And I think when you set out with certain people on shorter adventures, you kind of filter out who's going to work with you on really long days and who's not. And I don't know, yeah, some of my best friends are my partners in the mountains, and it's just incredible. And it's not to say that people who don't have the same risk margin, I can't go out in the mountains and have a good time with them. I totally do. But when you're doing really big endurance adventures or trying to go for records and you have a partner, you have to be pretty picky about who that partner is, and also understand that you, especially if you're soloing, you have to understand that you could die, and that person is making their own decisions for themselves, but you also have their back.
Yep.
And you have to think that same way. Like everyone, you got to be like fully in and understand those risks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I was going to ask you about how you sort of vet, but you kind of alluded to it with just maybe doing some shorter things and sort of feeling somebody out. And yeah, I'd imagine just, I guess maybe have you had situations where maybe the first few outings or what have you didn't work, but you sort of work through it with somebody, or is it just sort of like once it doesn't work, you say, all right, I'm moving on and finding somebody else?
Yeah, I have gone out on big adventures with people who I've needed to rescue and or get them out of the situation safely. It might not have, you know, uh, quite call it a rescue, but we were pretty much committed to a certain section of ridgeline and had to get them out safely. So I've made mistakes before with certain people. Maybe bringing people who are a little too confident in their abilities out, and then you realize that they don't really know what they're doing. And I have dropped people who said they were going to pace me on certain sections, and been like, hey, you know what? You're not moving fast enough. I'm sorry, but I have to leave you here and I'm going to go on. And that's a hard thing to do. But, when you're trying to go for a record, sometimes that's what you have to do.
Totally.
But yeah, I think most of the time, like, especially in the Tetons here, there is a certain level of ability that most people have who go in the mountains. And so I think it's a pretty safe bet that you're going to have generally pretty good partners for a lot of daily shorter outings. And then when you start pushing that like 18-hour to 24-hour mark, that's when you really see what people are made of. I think that's all I can say about that so far.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. And, into those longer affairs, when we were talking in prep for this conversation today, you had told me that, one of your skills is that you're pretty good with not sleeping for long periods of time, and you can sort of just plow through. But then you also told me that you're a very good sleeper and you need a lot of sleep. So in terms of getting ready for, say, a 24, 36-hour adventure, are you just stacking hours of rest, or how do you train for that sleeplessness, or is that just something that comes naturally to you?
Yeah, I know people who train for sleep deprivation. I personally don't think that does you any favors because you're just depriving yourself of sleep. I mostly just sleep a whole lot before I do something, and then it's the mental aspect that carries you through because you just get so psyched on what you're doing. It's like, all right, I'm going to stay awake and then let's rock and roll, for like the next 72 hours. We're just going to plow through and then sleep afterwards. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of like like not sleeping for a couple of nights before going to Burning Man. I'm not really sure what that's going to do for you.
No, other than make you twitchy and edgy. And then in terms of, characteristics, because obviously to do what you do, you've got to spend a lot of time training, I'd imagine. And it's a big part of who you are. But obviously you have other parts of you. And do you look for the same characteristics in your friends that are, and like, when you think about the holistic people that are around you in your community, do a lot of them have the same characteristics and traits as your adventure partners, or are you swing the completely other way to have a different group of people around you?
I'd say the people who are around me, all of my friends, no matter what they do, what their background is, they're all really positive people. They all like to be outside, although a lot of my really good friends don't do anything similar to what I do. I mean, they like to be outside, they like to hike, they like to ski, but they're not interested in endurance. A lot of them I've never even been to the top of a mountain with. And I just think that they're great people, and every one of my friends brings something amazing to the table. And I love my community. I love my friend group. I love having dinner parties with them. I love drinking wine with them. And no matter what their background is, I think about them when I'm out alone in the mountains, and it gives me that extra push, that extra like mental hug I need when I'm scared out there.
Yeah,
So,
I think I think I stumbled upon some of your videos of some of your adventures where, you were super candid and vulnerable, like where you got the shit scared out of you, and you could see it in the video. I mean, you were emotional, and I appreciated that sort of honesty. I mean, I think there's it makes it real. Like, again, as someone who, my longest run ever was 10-mile loop around Jenny Lake, I think, back in the day, right? And it's like, you get these visions of what it must be like, or you see people's pictures, right? But it's like that got real quick as an outsider. So yeah, I'd imagine it's yeah, you must go through the full range of emotions 40 miles in. But I wanted to ask you a question about something I think I had stumbled upon on another one of your podcasts, which is, the fact that you run without any music, which I think is awesome. And, I'd imagine helps you stay connected to what you're doing and be really, in the moment, in the flow. But if you were to pick three songs, uh, for an adventure, I know you won't do it, but what would be the three songs on the Kelly soundtrack?
oh my goodness. Okay. Um, let's see. Well, if I were trying to listen to some music in the middle of a huge event where I needed to try to cultivate like a badass attitude, um, it would probably be songs from, this is gonna sound kind of strange, but like ski videos, ski movies, because I used to watch so many of those back when I was trying to be like a hardcore snowboarder, and it just like gets me like really psyched up, especially because I have so many incredible friends who are professional skiers and snowboarders, and they're so inspiring with what they can do. So if I can pick like a song from a video where I'm like, oh my god, like I've got some friends in this film, like they're just throwing down super hard, and I take some of the music from that and I listen to it. I'm coming up with specifics. Sorry, I just had to like give you that background before.
Oh, and I completely put you on the spot. So if you don't have actual songs, it's totally fine. But it popped into my head. I'm like, I want to know what her soundtrack is, and I can resonate with that because I definitely remember the few TGR movies that were in play when I first moved to Jackson, and then those even the segments of who the particular skier was and the song, and just that would be in my mind as I'm hiking up the pass, or on a taking the tram up for a big powder day, and it's just like that those sort of soundtracks for your life. So those were a few of mine too.
Okay, I have three songs I can give you.
All right, what do you got?
All right, I have "Run Boy Run" by Woodkid,
Okay.
from a ski film. "Youngblood" by the Naked and Famous, also from a ski film. And "Paper Planes."
Who's that
and,
by?
um, MIA. And
Oh, good one. Yep.
yeah, those songs just like get me hyped up. And I'm
All
like,
right.
okay. So some of those I'll listen to on the way to a trailhead before I do a big run. But yes, you're right. I have a strict no music rule in the wilderness.
Well, it makes sense. So I'm going to give you three as I was sort of thinking about our conversation today. And obviously, we don't know each other that well, even though we have a whole bunch of people all in common. We never really crossed paths in Jackson. But I thought of three songs for you. The first one is Wild Child by Black Keys. If you haven't come across that one, I think it's great. It has this very like rhythmic beat to it that I was, you just see running across the Teton Crest, right? Then you've got Thunder Kiss 65 by White Zombie, because it's got like this dirty, raw, like crazy, like, punk aggro thing, artistic. And I know some of your art sort of has at times can feel kind of dark and interesting, right? And then the last one was it popped onto my music as I was driving to Tahoe over the weekend, was Chris Stapleton's "Devil Always Makes Me Think Twice," because it's got this like twangy Wyoming kind of feel, and he talks about drinking whiskey and making suspect choices. So put those in your playlist.
I definitely will. I'll listen to them tomorrow while I go running.
All right, let me know how I did with your with my music curation.
For sure. No, I'm excited.
So what's coming up for you? And obviously you've got your hands in the art world, in the climbing world. Oh, actually, you know what? I wanted to ask a question. Um, you love snowboarding, you love climbing, you love being in the mountains. Have you ever dipped your toe into, say, like snowboard mountaineering or any mountaineering with some, aspect of kind of putting all those sports together?
Yeah, a little bit in the Tetons. Skiing up in the park, there's a little bit of, you know, mixed mixed sport, a little bit of technical climbing up, a little bit of snowboarding down, but generally speaking, I get cold really easily. So I tend to keep my snowboard activities limited to, I don't know, maybe like 6 hours. Once it gets past there, I don't know, I have a really hard time warming up when I get cold. So um yeah, and that being said, I don't have any big goals snowboard mountaineering wise because of that reason. Um, but I would say that if I could keep myself super warm the way some of my friends can, I would probably be out there all the time, all day long. But yeah, like I said, I get cold easily and I don't want to frostbite my toes.
Makes sense. I will admit, embarrassingly so, that I invested in a pair of heated socks this winter, uh,
Nice.
and took them up to my cat skiing trip in Canada, and they were a lifesaver. And yeah, they were stupidly expensive and a really damn good choice, since I've been frostbiting my toes in race fit ski boots since I was Lord knows how old. So yeah, and I guess you can buy heated vests and heated gloves and heated whatever, but that'll probably slow you down. Um, so in terms of what's coming up for you, and obviously I know you do a lot of amazing runs and you put together various adventures and yeah, whatever level you want to speak it to it, because I know you might want to keep some of this stuff under your vest or under your hat until you do it. But what's coming up for you, whether it's in the art world or in the running or the climbing aspect of your life?
Well, art-wise, I am very, very slowly working on a companion book to the Wildlife in the Tetons book, and it's going to be a children's guidebook to the birds that we have here. So, like I said, slowly working on that one. Running wise, I've got some goals for this summer. I would like to throw down some fast times on some of the local mountains here in the park. I'm going to try to throw down a fast time on the Grand Teton, I think. I don't think that it's possible in any way for me to beat the women's fastest time on the Grand Teton. It's incredibly fast, but it's, my home mountain range, and I would love to at least try to throw down a personal fast time on the Grand. So that's one of them. I'd like to drop my time on a couple other peaks because I'm pretty sure, like I said, I can go back and do it faster. I'd like to go back and possibly repeat the Wind River High Route because I know that I can do it faster. I know exactly where I screwed up last time, and I'd like to see if I can do a cleaner run. And then I've got a couple other link ups I'm working on with some friends of mine. So yeah, we're still trying to figure out if those are actually possible to link up because it might be a little too technical for mountain running, but we'll see.
Awesome. Well, look, I hope all of your adventures go well. I hope you crush the times, and I'm looking forward to that bird book because we will add it to our collection here. And I really appreciate you being on the show today. It's great to get to connect, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure speaking and a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Be well. The Trailbreaker podcast is created by Aaron Feinberg with production support provided by Michael Morey. More interviews and videos can be found at aaronfeinberg.com.